This is Faith Family Cars Podcast. I'm Jerry.
I'm Zach.
Hit the key.
Hey guys, welcome back to Faith Family Cars Podcast. And you can see we're back in our makeshift studio again. It seems like every recording, there's something going on. Like today, we've got the remnants of hurricane passing through our area, and it's very windy and it's very rainy.
Well, it sucks because we kind of like started this whole thing and was saying, yeah, this is going to be in the garage, so it feels more relatable, kind of things like that. And now we're in a building. We've been in a building for a while.
And if any of you guys know anything about the audio, you know that it's hard to not pick up everything. And with a metal roof and rain beating down on it, it would not be good for your listening pleasure. Yeah,
it'd be pretty bad.
Yeah. So here we are again, and when we've done some of our interviews, it's also been a little better to be in here doing it rather than out there.
Well, especially with internet connection and things like that.
Yes, that's the main reason, because of we can cut out a lot of the sound because the mic we use for that is
noise canceling.
Yeah,
but when it comes to internet connection, we don't get very good service out in the garage.
So we're learning, and we are going to, I think, because of what we're learning here, we are going to make a better indoor studio to work with, and we're also going to do a little rearranging out in the shop to be able to make it work a little bit better too.
Yep. Just fix the audio problems. We realized there were some audio issues with the first couple.
So we're learning a lot. We've got some guys kind of giving us pointers and tips too, so that's helping out a lot. So today we want to talk a little bit about something that's we've been talking about a lot, because we've been going to the Holley sponsored events at Beech Bend. So most everybody has heard of LSFest East, and we went to that. You recently saw our podcast about that. Yep. Holley FordFest is going on, and
as of us recording that, we actually just came back from that.
Yeah, so very disappointing because the hurricane
it's been raining all day. Very little's happening. There's not really any booths open, which we've recorded some footage from that, so y'all probably see a little bit of that.
You'll be seeing that. But the one show that we've never been to is MoParty, and that actually just started like 2 years ago.
That's something I'm really interested in.
Yeah,
I don't know how long it's been around, but it's something I'm really interested in.
It has not been around very long. That just kind of got started. But the month of September is like the big three all have their events.
Well, and I found out in between that, there's a bike event in between MoParty and FordFest. Yeah. I didn't realize that, but there's also like a big bike show too, so even bikes get some love, which is pretty cool.
So we thought, hey, it would be cool, because when you go to LSFest, what are you seeing? You're seeing all kinds of LS swapped vehicles.
LS and LTs is what it is.
Yes, and that's all that's there. And then when you go to Holley FordFest, you see a lot of Coyote swaps.
You're seeing a lot of Godzilla swaps.
You're starting to see a lot of Godzillas now, which I think are really cool looking, because when you first walk up on them and you look at them, it's like real quick you're thinking, that's an LS. Yeah. But it's not an LS.
Yeah, well, we walked up on one today that had a big old LS-styled intake on it. Yeah.
And so at first glance, you might think, hey, that looks a lot like an LS.
Yeah, but I kind of figured it was actually just a small block, because they make Holley makes an LS style like intake, like they do for, like everybody gets the big old high rise ones.
Yes.
They make one for a small block Ford. Yeah. But it was
excuse me.
I like seeing all the Godzillas, because it's more classic to me.
Yeah.
I guess it's a push rod rather than the modular motors. It's essentially just a bigger LS.
It does not.
It's getting compared to.
When you look down in the engine bay with a Godzilla sitting in there, it does not look nearly as big as the Coyote does sitting in there.
Yeah, well, it's because the heads are so giant on the Coyote.
Yeah. So, and then at MoParty, you see all kinds of Hemi swaps.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about this on our LSFest podcast, but the thing that I enjoy a lot about the idea of MoParty, because we haven't been to it yet, but the idea of MoParty and the idea of FordFest is the fact that it's anything powered by those motors. And whenever you get into like anything powered by a Ford motor at FordFest and anything powered by a Chrysler motor at MoParty. Doesn't matter if it's, like in the LSFest case, it's only LS's. When you go to FordFest, it's not just Coyotes, and when you go to MoParty, it's not just Hemis. It's everything, which I think is really interesting.
But again, like somebody brought up to us when we were discussing with them our pros and cons about LSFest, they said LS is such a huge platform. It's big enough to have its own show.
Yeah.
To where you couldn't do that with just Coyotes.
Yeah.
There's not enough Coyote swaps out there.
Yeah.
There's not enough Hemi swaps out there. So
Coyotes are getting there. I will say that.
Yeah, they are. They are because you're finding them. You're finding them in everything.
It's almost getting annoying.
Yeah,
because they are in everything.
Yeah. Well, and they're in my opinion, they're probably a little more of a difficult swap than doing an LS style swap.
It is. Well, but they're still developing parts for everything.
They are.
I mean, they've pretty much got it down pat for Fox bodies and essentially F-Series trucks. But anything outside of that, and you're kind of trying to fab up your own stuff.
Yeah.
So
so if you're putting a Coyote in a Maverick, it's a whole totally different animal.
Oh yeah.
So, but all that said, that led us to, we've been talking a lot about the different swaps. So we thought today that we would start out right now talking about the difference in doing an LS swap and a small block like 350 or 305 or 327.
A lot of it, like whether you should just keep what you got in there, like if you've got an old OBS pickup with a 350 in it, if you should keep the 350 or if you should invest the money for the LS.
Yeah.
And, one thing to keep in mind is we are not professionals at any of this. We have actually, the only swap we have done is a small block Ford swap.
Yeah.
So, but we've done a lot of research over the years. I mean, especially with Coyote swaps, we've done a ton of research on Coyote swaps. And, we'll obviously be more, intelligible on the Ford side of things just because that's what we research. But we've done research on everything. So we're just going to kind of,
hit a few points about each one and kind of give our opinion on it. Because everybody has their opinion, right? I talk to guys even about, everybody's got their opinion not only about this, but people have got their opinion about carbureted or fuel injected.
Yeah.
So that's something I think we'll hit on a little bit here with these two.
Yeah.
But let's just start out with, whenever I was a teenager, there was no LS engine.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a 350 or a 305.
You were in your 20s when the first LS came out.
Yes. No, not quite. The first LS came out in 97-ish, 96, 97 in the Camaro.
Did it come out in the Camaro? I thought it came out in the Corvette.
Corvette. Yeah, Corvette had an LS1 5.7, Camaro Super Sports, and I think Z28 got the same motor.
Yeah.
So that was when I was, in my late teens, and that was all new technology.
It's nothing like what the LS is today at all.
No distributor, everything's electronically controlled, and you did not have the technology for the aftermarket wasn't there yet.
No.
They just came out. So when I was a kid, you saw a lot of 383 stroker engines. You saw a lot of guys doing the 350 with just some heads and a cam in it, give it some chop.
Yeah. And
that's what you did with a cruiser. Or
that's really all you needed though. You could make decent power out of just cam and heads. Heads for, I know especially for an LS, but for like the 350s, it's a pretty decent power gain off some heads. So.
Yeah. And so, but you were taking I can't remember the numbers. It's been so long. Used to, I would have known the exact horsepower numbers for a Chevy 350. But so back in the late 80s, early 90s, you might have been looking at a couple hundred horsepower, maybe 250 max, and in a Silverado or in a Camaro, like a 80s Camaro, you're looking at 185, 195 horsepower, 305 or 350.
Yeah.
So the only thing that guys were really doing is intake, heads, and a cam swap.
Yeah.
And headers, stuff like that, and that's where you were seeing your power gains. And then when you moved into the LS, and then early 2000s, you start seeing these LS swaps, and it was just total game changer, really. But for guys, my age and older, a lot of us didn't jump into that right away. We didn't grow up with that. And so it was kind of intimidating a little bit. And I know, especially for the older guys, even now, a lot of the old heads are just die-hard, small block Chevy with minor upgrades. But look, from what we know, from what most everybody knows, you're only going to get 450, maybe 500 horsepower or something like that without...
trying to get... I mean, you've got to usually go aftermarket block and, then go, upgraded bottom end and things like that. I mean, you can usually get 400 or 500 just out of top end builds. And, I mean, it takes... So you need internals and a block to handle it. And see, that's where LS trumps the small block Chevy, because it's like... I mean, you see stories all the time of people with stock block, 5.3s, and they're pushing 1,000 horsepower, and it's just a stock block motor. They just pulled it out of a truck just a couple days ago and threw a turbo kit on it and heads on it. You know what I'm saying? And it's just they make crazy horsepower
with a Chevy 350. Okay, because that's what most everybody used. Okay, I think a 327's cool. 305s, in my opinion, were just trash.
Yeah.
And I know a 350 is really a bigger 305, but the 305 was trash. I'm sorry. So you look at a 350, and back in my day, you had a 4-bolt main.
Yeah.
You had a real engine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And if you listen to Tim Davis the other day, he was talking about how he thought it was so awesome because he had a 4-bolt main. Because a 4-bolt main was a much stronger block. It was stronger than a Windsor Ford.
Yeah.
And so you could get 600-700 horsepower out of those blocks. And if you had a 700 horsepower 350, which most of the time it wasn't a 350, it was like a 383 stroker engine, then you were running some good quarter mile times for that time.
Yeah.
And
depending on what car it was in.
Yeah, depending on what car it was in. So when I think about, you had a cast iron block, you had 4-bolt main, you had cast crank, you didn't have any forged piston rods or anything. Everything was cast.
Well, for the time, what stronger motor were you going to get?
You weren't.
There wasn't anything.
No. And you could buy you could go on Chevy for Performance or whatever it was back then. I think that's what it still was back then. And you could buy a crate engine, 350 crate engine that was a 4-bolt main, and you could build that. So, but now when you move into LS, you're an all aluminum 6-bolt main.
Now you can get an iron block.
Yes, you can. Yes. And a lot of guys I think use those for race purposes. But I know that the all aluminum sheds a lot of poundage off. I think I seen somewhere where an all aluminum was only like 185 pounds or.
I don't know. I can't remember. I haven't seen anything about the weight difference. I just know that it's lighter because it's aluminum.
Yeah, I think it was like 175 or 185 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's a very light block compared to cast iron.
Yeah.
Chevy 350.
Well, I mean, one thing I do know is of every swap that we'll be talking about today, unless you are, going to stick with like out of the newer swaps. So I'm talking Hemi, Coyote, LS. LS is the cheapest swap you can possibly do on any vehicle at all.
Yeah.
You got a Fox body, you can LS swap it cheaper than you can Coyote swap it. I mean, you got a S10 Blazer, you can LS swap it cheaper than any other swap. Like if I was to put a Coyote in my SN95, it would be cheaper for me to put a LS in a Blazer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the cheapest swap, and that's one thing that's so attractive to people is, I mean, you take, especially for racing, that's why everybody drives Fox bodies and they're all LS powered, is because you can get a car that weighs under 3,000 pounds and put in a motor an aluminum motor, doesn't weigh much of anything, that you can get out of the junkyard for, anywhere between $500, $800, depending on where you go. And I mean, I don't know, if you go to our local pull apart, you can get one for $300 if you pull it yourself.
If you can find one.
If you can find one, that is the thing, yeah. But you do all that.
But you can go on eBay and get one for $800.
Yeah, pre-pulled, just send it to you.
Yeah.
But you do all that, and then you throw a set of heads, a cam, an intake, and a turbo on it, and obviously an exhaust. I mean, you don't do all that without an exhaust.
Yeah.
You do all that, and you can make upwards of 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you got to upgrade your fuel system and things like that, but that is all still cheaper than me getting a Fox body and putting a Coyote in it, and then putting a $5,000 Whipple on the Coyote. I'm a big Ford guy, but LS, if you want cheap power, is the best, fastest way. It's the best thing you can do. I mean, it's so quick.
And he's saying all those mods, and you can do that on a 150, 200,000 mile block.
Yeah.
And when you open that block up, these motors are very dependable. You'll still have cross hatching in your cylinders. And you might not even have to do any machining to it. You can do these mods to it, drop it in, and run with it.
And then another thing, too, is these motors are so dime a dozen that you blow it up at the racetrack. You can literally swap all your parts out, replace the bad parts, and throw it all back together and be ready for race week the next weekend.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's...
So, with the LS swap, yes, it is. It's a cheap swap to do. These motors have been around a lot longer than the Coyote.
Yeah.
They've been around longer than Hemis.
Well, than the new gen Hemis, because they had Hemis obviously in the 60s and 70s.
Yes, the new gen Hemis, yes. Because the new generation Hemis, have electronic everything.
Yeah,
too,
we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, because there's a lot of pros to a Hemi.
But then when I go back and I think about a small block 350, and I'm thinking about the sound of the motor, I'm thinking about, to me, almost the cool factor, because...
You don't see it anymore.
Nowadays, you don't see it anymore. Most everything, if you walk up on a square body C10, you're going to see an LS in it. And it makes sense. Yes, they're durable. They're not going to break on you, and you can get a lot of power out of them. And even if you're just using your vehicle as a cruiser, they're a good motor.
Yeah.
But, excuse me, the thing that you got to think about, though, when you do an LS swap, so say you've got a 1985 Chevy C10. It's got a 350 in it. Okay, you build that motor. Do you build that motor? Do you put an LS in? When you put an LS in that, you've got to change your entire fuel system, fuel tank, fuel pump, fuel lines. You've got to change your radiator. You've got to have a radiator that's going to be able to cool. Even though that's aluminum, you want it to cool well. You got to change motor mounts. Now, most of the time, depending on what transmission's in that 85, you can put just about any transmission with an LS, any General Motors transmission. But
that's one thing that's good about it is, whether you got a 4L80E, 4L60E, you've got 700 R4. Even the NV3500s and the 5-speed trucks that bolts right up to an LS.
Yeah.
So, as long as it's like a 5.3 or 4.8, I don't know anything about the 6.0s and anything like, when it gets into the...
Well, it's getting to where most racers
LS4s, 5, 6, I don't know anything
most
about
guys
that.
that are building them for racing are using 6.0s or
5.3s.
Yeah, but a lot of guys are even getting away from the 5.3s because they're moving into the 6.0s.
It just depends. It depends on how... into it you are.
Yeah.
Because a lot of your still local boys that do their racing is still
your lower
5.3s
budget
because
boys.
It's cheap. But when you get
can
into
find them in any truck.
Well, when you get into high horsepower, like small tire, you get into bigger motors, like the 6.0 and stuff.
So when you think about all the extras, okay, you get your bracketry to mount everything. You've got you got to go electric fans, and just so many little things that aren't real expensive that add up to big things. Then on top of all of that, the biggest cost to me has got to be the computer to control it all.
Yep.
Because you're not just going to go, most of the time, you're not just going to go with a factory, General Motors Chevrolet computer so you go pull this motor out of the junkyard and you pull the wiring harness and everything. That's not going to necessarily work that way. You're going to have to fish through that wiring harness and make everything work.
Yeah. A lot of guys will go with Holley fuel injection anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of guys go with the Terminators and stuff on the system for the LS. And
that's a big cost.
Yeah, it's a very big cost.
That system's going to cost you probably, and I'm not nearly, but it will cost you twice as much as your engine did.
Yeah. But a lot of guys
to purchase the initial cost of the motor.
A lot of guys
do
upgrades. Leave stock intakes and stuff like that. But if you want to make really any decent amount of power, an intake is what people usually swap out.
Yeah.
So it's one of the first things.
I've seen all kinds of numbers thrown around on what it costs to do an LS.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what you want out of the LS.
If you want, it does depend. But if you all in all, if you want a nice cruiser that can make you some decent power, you can do a burnout with if you really want to. There's no reason you don't go the small block Chevy.
Yeah.
No reason at all. Unless you just want, the LS, just because for the LS, or maybe you have future plans of building it. I don't see a reason, like if, like your truck, with the situation with your truck, you don't really have any reason for a Coyote in your truck.
It's a cruiser.
It could get a Coyote one day because that'd be sick. Same thing with these people that would put an LS in a truck.
The cool factor is...
Yes, it's the cool factor. Yeah. But
I've got an LS in my 85 C10.
Yeah. Realistically, it's, there's... If you want a cruiser that's going to be dependable and, you can take to your local shows and stuff like that, there's no reason to have a 350.
No.
And because, with how much cheaper you're going to get away with...
No reason to have an LS.
Yeah. No reason to have an LS. Because it's how much cheaper you're going to get away with, especially if your vehicle already has one. And if it doesn't, let's say you have a 6-cylinder truck and you want to put a 350 in it. All you got to do, you got to swap stock motor mounts and that's it, Yeah. And maybe
if it's a 4.3 V6 to a 350, I'm not sure you have to change the motor mounts.
I don't know. But, it's so much cheaper, and if you want a cruiser, there's no reason to go with an LS if you're trying to save money.
Yeah.
Now, if you want high horsepower, and you want to be able to...
Race it or turbo it.
Yeah, or turbo it, you got to go with the LS, because... On this list that we've kind of, we've got some bullet points here that we want to hit. And on this list here, it is the cheapest thing. Is the cheapest swap you're going to possibly have. Like anything on this list, it's cheaper than anything.
But still, to do it right, you're going to be out, we're not talking, you hear these guys all the time say, I got an $800 LS in my truck. No, you don't. You've got a 6,000 plus LS in your truck.
Where you spend $5,000 on an LS, that is to just install a stock LS, get everything else you need, and then maybe
do a few upgrades.
You can do a couple mods. With how much you would do to that, you could put that same amount of money in a 350 and probably max that 350 out and come close to it.
Yeah, you would.
So,
but that's and that's what we're saying with this just a standard LS build. You still got a ceiling ahead of you.
Yeah.
You don't with a 350. You get 450 horsepower. That's probably about where you're going to stop with that.
Yeah. But if budget doesn't matter to you, I would go LS all the way.
Well, yeah.
There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Because you could with an LS, the sky's the limit when it comes to power. You can do, pretty much whatever you want. Put it in any car you want. There's swap kits for everything. And if there's not a swap kit, it's probably not that hard to fabricate because people put them in everything.
Yeah.
All the time. So
I just look at it from if you're a budget guy, okay, and you're building a budget truck. So like my truck's a budget truck. Mm-hmm. So if you're wanting to build and like I've just used the same example, an 85 C10, and you got a basic truck there that had a V6 in it, and you pull that motor and you want to drop which those might have had an inline 6 now that I think about it. But anyway, that doesn't matter. And you want to put a 350 in it, if you might find you a low mileage 350 that needs machine work, okay? And you tear it completely down, you do the machine work, you can put that motor back together with heads, with a cam, with bored out, with pistons.
If you want to throw a big carb on it.
Yeah, and you can put a big carb, or you can even put a Holley EFI on it for around $6,000.
Yep.
$5,000 to $6,000.
And you've got a pretty powerful swap there.
Yes, and it's a nice cruiser. It's a dependable motor.
Lay big burnouts.
Yeah, it'll lay big burnouts, and it will sound good too.
Yeah.
Now, you can also go even cheaper than that and say your truck already has a 350 in it. Well, if you pull that motor and you pull the cylinder, or you open it up and you look at the cylinders and you see the cross hatching, you can just run a dingle ball in it and clean it up real good, put that thing back together, and run that thing, and you've chopped your price, $700-800 from not having to do machine work.
Yep.
So you can do a very budget friendly build with the 350 and make a good cruising engine. Mm-hmm. But you can also do similar with the LS, but then
you got to factor in all the swap parts.
Yes, you got to factor in all the swap parts, and that's a lot of times when you hear I did an LS for $800. No, they didn't factor in.
Now I do have to give it to a lot of the LS guys though. When you talk about a budget swap, LS is the budget swap.
It is the budget swap.
That is the budget swap. It's even cheaper than like a Hemi. You know what I'm saying? And because for the price of a Hemi. It's almost double the price of an LS.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the reason that it is budget swap, because the initial cost for the block And, when you go to the junkyard and buy that motor, or you buy that motor off eBay, you're getting it for significantly less.
Yes.
So when you
factor in all the swap parts, you're still way under what you would pay for, especially the Coyote. Coyote prices are still outrageous. Yeah, and it's kind of annoying.
When you think about Coyote, okay, so Coyotes to me, I remember it's only been a few years ago you really started seeing the Coyote swaps.
I would say probably 2020 is when it really took off.
Yeah, but it was before then because the Coyote, actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but the Coyote came out in 2010. 2011, yeah.
Well, I guess technically they built them in 2010. But the car didn't come out until 2011.
So they came out in the F-150s and they came out in the Mustangs in 2011. And I had a 2011 F-150 with a Coyote in it, and a lot of people said that generation Coyote had a lot of problems. Mine was extremely dependable.
Yeah, yours did good.
Had no problems. We towed a camper with that truck all over the eastern part of the United States, and never had an issue with it, and not one single thing until it hit I think it was a little over 100,000 miles. I had a water pump leak. I had to replace the water pump. That's all I did.
That's it, yeah.
So those are really dependable motors. You talk about LS as being dependable. Coyotes are very dependable too. Yeah. Even the first generation ones are.
Yeah. So, well, if we, I guess we'll move over to Fords then.
Yeah, let's go on over to Fords.
So, I personally am a huge small block Ford fan just because love the sound of the chop of the motor. I mean, in my opinion, there is nothing that sounds better than a small block Ford.
With a set of Flowmasters on it.
Oh, yeah. Cam small block Ford with a set of Flowmasters. There's nothing that sounds better.
So it's funny.
I probably get a lot of hate from that because, all these LS guys are like, man, there's nothing better than LS. But in my opinion, you can't get any better than a small block Ford.
No, and it's funny, at FordFest, the announcer said, if you don't have Flowmaster on your...
If you don't like
Flowmasters on your small block Ford, then you're either, what did he say?
He said you're either stupid or you're 12.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, that's true.
That's what I feel, man. I mean, a set of Flowmasters, I mean, it gives the small block Ford a sound like no other. There is nothing that compares to the sound of a small block Ford with Flowmasters.
When I was a teenager, and a Fox Body 5.0 comes rolling through with a set of Flowmaster 40s on it, dual chamber 40s, you knew what that was. Yeah. You didn't even have to turn around and look. You knew that a Mustang GT or an LX 5.0
it's got a very specific sound.
Oh, yeah.
So the thing with the small block Fords, though, and I've done a lot of research on these because I've had multiple 302s, and that's just kind of where my heart's at. I love a Coyote, but I can't get past the sound of a 302, and then... it comes to with how cheap they are too. Now, the biggest downfall is the kind of your horsepower limit.
Yeah.
But with how cheap the blocks are, I mean, I don't think I've ever spent more than $100 on a block.
I never have either.
Maybe $200.
You can't get them for that right now.
No, you can't. Now, I bought mine about 3 or 4 years ago last time I bought a block.
Yeah.
But
I did too. I mean, we've actually got a complete motor taken completely apart.
Well, we've got enough parts to build probably 3 motors.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
but we only have one block. We only got one block. Yes. So, in my opinion, with how cheap you can get the blocks, you can get a 302 for $300 or $400.
Yeah.
So you're kind of looking at the same price you would for a 350.
Yeah.
But you with how cheap the block is, and the biggest downfall, like I said, is the horsepower. So a lot of people say that they can max out at 500 horsepower. That's not true. They can actually max out, quite a bit higher. I mean, there's people that get 600-700 horsepower out of these motors. But the problem is you've got to manage your RPM.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you've got some guys that'll make 500 horsepower but rev out to 7,000. Personally, I don't really think that motor's going to last very long.
Yeah.
If you keep your RPMs under 6,000, you could probably make a 700 horsepower motor last forever. But it's just all about playing with the RPM.
Well, a good example of that is, I can't think of the guy's name out in California.
Craig 909?
Craig 909. Yeah, I mean, I've watched him since he was just out of high school, starting his YouTube channel. And he does it.
Yeah. See, his situation's confusing because it's like he makes 500 horsepower out of the block that's in his truck right now. But he revs it out to 7,200. I just don't see how it'll last. But obviously, I'm not an engine builder either. So
he does have a shirt, I think, and a sticker that says "Small Block Killer" on it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, he's destroyed quite a few.
Yes, he has.
But I mean, when it comes to price, once again, this is another thing where it's like it's all about budget. So if you've got a small budget, like okay, I'm gonna use me for example because I've got a motor I'm working on right now. I've got an E303 cam and trick flow springs, right? That together, I'm out $700. Okay, and this is all brand new stuff. Well, that's brand new. I've got an intake that I bought for $100 that I'm going to.
It's a GT40 intake.
GT40 intake. I'm gonna.
If you know small block Fords, you know that that's it's a GT, easy, cheap upgrade.
Yeah, I got that for $100, and we're gonna. I can't even think of port it. We're gonna port it. So then. On top of that, you can buy a used set of aluminum heads on Facebook Marketplace for $700 to $1,000. I would say you can buy GT40 heads for cheaper, but the problem is unless you want some really, really trashy ones, you're not going to get them for under $1,000 for some reason. But people are out of their mind. They'll clean them up and be like, it's the best thing ever. And it's really not. You gain maybe 10 horsepower.
You can still buy, though, a set of GT40 heads for a few $100s and then go have them machined for a few $100s.
Yeah. But if you go to a pull apart and you can actually pull them off there yourself, and I think you can get them for $120.
I think it was $120 last time. Yeah.
So, but anyway, in my opinion, this is the way I'm going to.
But you got to find a good Ford Explorer that has some GT40P heads, and if you want just the original GT40 heads, those are really hard to find. I've only had one set.
Yeah. Well, so when it comes to a small block Ford, like I said, you port a GT40 intake, go with an E303 cam, which is the cheapest cam you can possibly buy. They get a lot of hate, and I know there's probably people listening to this that are going to hate on it because for some reason they're the most controversial cam ever. Don't understand why.
I don't understand why. For some reason, when I was a teenager, that's what everybody did.
Well, the letter cams for some reason are very controversial. Whatever. I don't know. Everybody's like, you need to get a custom cam. But look, when you're
old technology.
When you're trying to ball on a budget, you go with an E303 or a B303.
That's right.
So for me, I'm going E303. I'm going GT40 intake. I'm going to buy some random brand of aluminum heads off of Marketplace for $700, $800, and I'm gonna buy an eBay turbo kit for $600 and probably push close to 400 horsepower on a stock bottom end.
Yeah.
So with the small block Ford though, I will say if you really want to get any power, at least from what I have learned, you really need a like Terminator fuel injection or like some sort of ECU that is not the stock ECU, just because it's hard to tune. There's limits with it. But I mean, realistically, you can do all that.
You're still running an OBD2 system. I mean,
well, no, I'm running OBD1.
OBD1. I'm sorry, you're running an old OBD1 system, and nobody wants to tune it.
Yeah, there's only one person I know near me that will tune it, but I just don't know what the limits of that computer are. But I mean, so you can do all that and then throw stock Cobra injectors on them, which are 24-pound injectors. You can do all that. Yeah, you can do all that. And maybe have, what would you say, $3,000, $4,000 into the whole motor? Maybe less than that?
I would say around $4,000 because the last 302 that I built, which was right around COVID, before prices kind of went nuts, I had $3,000 into it, and I did similar to what you're saying.
So you do
I did GT40 heads, I did aluminum intake, and I went carb on this.
Yeah.
And I did a cam, and but I had a really good block that still had cross hatching in it, and it was very clean, that come out of a truck that was in a junkyard that I knew the guy very well who owned the junkyard, and he said it was like an 80,000 mile truck.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a perfect scenario.
Yeah.
So if you add machining into that, and now prices now, you might be around $4,000 to $5,000.
So let's say you add all that together, right? $4,000 to $5,000, and you can honestly, just depending on how much you want to push the stock bottom end, you could potentially get 400, more than 400. But I don't know if I'd push my stock bottom end that far. But you only live once, might as well blow
400 horsepower.
It's a lot of power.
Is a good cruiser. It's a good if you want to go to the racetrack. I mean, and I've seen, have a little fun.
I've seen 500 horsepower Fox bodies run 10-second quarter miles. So stock bottom end, with.
And somebody just said no way.
Well, yeah. Well, look, I know you say no way, but there's a guy that I follow on Instagram that actually, he's not even turboed. He has a nitrous system that isn't even hooked up. But he has just a built top end, some nice heads, nice intake, massive throttle body. I don't remember how big it is, but it's big. But anyway, he has all that, and he ran like a 10.9 in a Fox body. It's full interior. So, I mean, it's doable. It's very, very doable. It just depends on the car and how you drive. And it's also a stick shift car, too. But anyway, I say all that, $5,000, I say all that to say that's how much it is to get a motor and transmission for a Coyote.
Yeah.
So I can make 400
and that's
horsepower.
all you're getting.
But here's the thing that you run into, too. If you're wanting a lot of power, your 400 horsepower is what the stock Coyote starts at.
Yes.
So that's also where you're at. Unless you want to buy an aftermarket block, a small block Ford is extremely limited.
Yeah, and you're spending the same money to buy the Coyote.
Well, yeah.
But if you go back a few years ago, I remember going to FordFest in 2019. First year for FordFest.
For Holley.
Yeah. Yes. And they had Mars Engines out there, I believe was the name of the company. And they had these Coyotes sitting up on engine stands where you could hear them run. They'd fire them up and let you hear them run. They were selling them. Engine, 6-speed transmission, because that's what the Gen 1 came with.
Yep.
6-speed transmission, automatic, or manual.
Well, 2019, it was at the Gen 2 at that point, so they might have had some Gen 2s out.
They might have had some Gen 2s, but I think they were mostly Gen 1s.
Okay.
But they might have been Gen 2s. Anyway, none of that really matters. This is the point. 2019... motor transmission, $11,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way that for a lot of guys, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But for the budget guy, you're not sinking $11,000 just into your motor.
Well, here's also to add to it.
And your trans.
I'm thinking, even if you go with aftermarket block on a small block Ford, even if you go aftermarket block, you're still only out about $2,000 on the aftermarket block.
Yeah.
So you can have a built bottom end. You can let's just take a 351 for example, because I've been doing a lot of research on those lately. Take a 351 with an aftermarket block, right? You stroke it out to a 408, and obviously this is getting way out of budget. This isn't budget anymore, obviously. But
this is building a racing.
Yes, but you take a 351, stroke it out to a 408, and you have a vehicle that the 351 will already fit in, like an SN95 Mustang, just swap motor mounts out, and you're good. And you're still most likely going to be under or right at the price of a slightly built Coyote.
Yeah. So, but that's why so many people do Coyote swaps. But again, Coyote swap is the same way as an LS. You have to have the computer. Yeah. You have to have the wiring harness. And that's the thing, like with Godzillas. Godzillas have only been out a couple years now. But when you go to put a Godzilla in, Ford just started, I think last year or maybe the end of the year before, producing the wiring harnesses. They were selling the crate engines. Yeah. No wiring harness.
Well, and then on top of that,
so a lot of guys bought a bunch of engines but couldn't install them.
On top of that, there was, for a long time, there was no intake options for aftermarket. So if you wanted any sort of power, you were limited at what your intake could handle.
But then the Boss 302 intake, they started selling that.
Now a lot of companies are making custom stuff. Yes. Like we went to the Texas Speed booth today, and they had a custom intake. I don't know what brand it was. They had a custom intake on a Godzilla.
And well, I think that there was a Godzilla a couple years ago that I saw that when they went, one of the very first, it might have been the first Godzilla swap I ever saw, in an F100 that had a Holley intake on it that was very, very similar to the LS intake. Yeah. It may have been an LS intake. Yeah. But it looked just like the Holley high-rise LS intake.
Well, all I know is the price of Coyotes, in my opinion, I would much rather I prefer the sound of a small block Ford. I'd much rather buy an aftermarket block and build myself a decent horsepower, small block Ford than go with the Coyote swap. But then again, you also go with the Coyote swap, it already makes 435 horsepower stock. So you put a Whipple on it, and you can make. They make
700 horsepower.
Yeah, they make kits where they pretty much just say, we have.
But a Whipple is also going to cost you $5,000-$6,000.
Yeah, so when you're out $20,000 on the Coyote swap, you're only out 10 or 15 on the small block Ford.
But so, you're making double the horsepower.
Depending, or it depends. It depends on. So if you only do a Whipple, you're kind of. You can obviously make more out of just a Whipple, but. Their stock tune that they kind of send with it is 700 horsepower. And I could make 700 horsepower out of a 350, not bored out. I can make 700 horsepower out of a stock block 351. Sorry,
Yeah,
stock block 351. So it's like, if I can make that much power I can make 700 out of a stock block 351, or I can make 700 out of a $20,000 Coyote swap. Why would I do that?
Well, yeah, I understand that. But
I'm also just very biased to small block Fords.
The technology in the Coyote is way further along than that small block Ford could have ever been. But the Coyote swap also, if you think about a 3,000 pound Fox body Mustang, or you think about a 4,500 pound F100, you're talking a dent side or a bump side F100 with a Coyote in it, and you've got just a stock 400 horse Gen 3 Coyote in that. Mm-hmm.
It's 460 if it's a Gen 3.
Yeah, you're talking a ton of power.
You got a 10-speed to back it up too.
And so you have a very dependable engine here because the Coyotes have proven to be very dependable over the years. And yes, you're spending a lot of upfront money, but you're probably going to drive that vehicle for the rest of your life and not ever have to do nothing to it.
See, that's another thing. So I'm very biased to small block Fords, but I will say one thing about a Coyote is it is the same as an LS in the fact that the sky is the limit.
Yes.
And currently, one of the fastest cars in small block racing is Brett LaSala's Snot Rocket, which I'm actually wearing his shirt right now. But anyway, his Coyote, he's got in that for the longest time. I can't remember exactly, but the first time I ever heard about him was on a 1320 video. I think it was about 3-4 years ago. And he had a 2,000 horsepower stock block, stock crank, like 2013 or 14 Mustang GT. And that blew me away that he was pushing 2,000 on a stock block, stock crank. And still currently, on his 6-second quarter-mile car, he's still with a stock crank, which is just absolutely insane. And that's something that about the Coyote is it's so strong with stock internals. Well, with the stock crank. You obviously need pistons.
With the 302 or the 351, you need to get forged.
Mm-hmm. And it costs
forged internals.
And realistically, it does still cost a ton of money to build. Like I was talking about, like if you have a 351 stroke to a 408, you want to build a race motor out of that. It costs a ton of money. But if you have a car that has a Coyote in it, like you've got a 2013 Mustang, and you've already spent the money on the car. I mean, a Whipple, you put a Whipple on it and you're already making 200 extra horsepower, 300 extra horsepower. I mean, is $5,000 really that bad if you're making that much extra horsepower right there? I mean, if you got a vehicle with a Coyote, in my opinion, if you're swapping a Coyote, it's so expensive. It's ridiculously expensive. But if you've got a vehicle with a Coyote in it, I mean, you're kind of set because the sky's the limit with that motor.
You can go as high as you want.
You can make it as fast as you want to make it. I mean, like I said, Brett LaSala's he is one of the fastest small block racers right now, or small tire racers right now. And I mean, the only thing that competes with him is I think there's like a 2J Supra or something that's pretty quick too. But I mean, the Coyote has really established itself as one of the best motors for power ever built.
Well, and there's another motor that we can throw in there for Ford, and we're not going to spend any time on this, but when you look at the 4.6 and the 5.4, the first modular motors, and the Coyote is based off of that. A lot of people don't like them. They say that they were problems, but you can take a 4.6 2-valve or 3-valve, and you can build a nice horsepower motor. Yeah. You can take a Cobra motor, 4-valve Cobra motor, and I'm here to tell you that is a super dependable motor. And you can build some power out of it.
From what I have read on forums, I don't have a lot of experience with this, but what I've read on forums, you can make like 1,500 horsepower out of a stock block. So
that's a particular block, though, right?
It's the 4.6. It's the Cobra.
It's a tech.
I think it's the Tech Skid or Test Skid or something
Test Skid or something. Block. You have to have that block.
Because there was 2 plants.
Yes.
But either way, you can still, even with the other block, I'm sure you can make over 1,000.
You probably could, but that's the strongest block.
Yes, but I mean, there's a guy that I follow on Instagram,
which I think happens to be the one that's in mine.
Yeah, I think so. The one, I follow a guy on Instagram. I don't know exactly what block's in his car, but I mean, he's got a 4.6 Cobra, and it's a Terminator. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the thing runs. It's a stick shift car, and it runs an 8-second quarter mile.
But if you want to talk about a a cheap, on the cheap budget build that you could probably do for as cheap, or if not cheaper than an LS, is a 4.6.
2-valve, yeah.
2-valve.
Because, I mean, they came in everything. They literally put them in everything. And honestly, you can actually go pretty
Crown
cheap
Vics
on a...
everywhere, guys.
Well,
Crown Vics
you
are
can
everywhere.
go pretty cheap on a 4-valve, too.
Yeah.
And Brett to share some top secret information with people that... Not really top secret. Just not a whole lot of people know this, but a Lincoln Mark 8 has a Cobra motor in it.
It's got a Cobra motor
and I think it actually has the one with C heads in it. And if that's the case, then an Eaton supercharger works off of a Terminator.
Or you can do, which this is a lot harder to find, you can do a 32-valve dual overhead cam 5.4 liter out of a Lincoln Navigator. If you want to talk something very similar to getting closer to a Coyote
I actually
type build.
follow another guy on Instagram that's got a very fast 5.4.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's doable.
So those motors are, in my opinion, you can go and you can get a 2-valve 4.6 to put in your F100 or to put in your... whatever. If you've got a
cruiser, a 2-valve is great.
Is great.
Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to make power, a 2-valve is not the greatest.
No, but if
it
you're
takes
building a cruiser,
lot of money
that's
to get
a good, dependable motor.
Yeah, it takes a lot of money to get 400 horsepower out of one. I mean, I think it probably takes almost more than just buying a 302.
Oh, I'm sure. But I'm not saying that as... Now,
yeah,
I'm saying the Cobra motors and the 5.4s, yes, you can build a ton of power out of them.
Yeah.
But if you want just a good cruiser motor, a 4.6...
If you want a dependable cruiser, I mean, that 4.6 is not going to let you down.
Think about all the police cars that are out there.
Oh, yeah.
4.6s.
They get dogged on all the time, too.
And you can't hardly kill them.
Yeah.
And they're good, dependable motors, and people don't realize that.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys that are doing F100 with Crown Vic front end swaps under them, a lot of those guys are leaving the 4.6 in there.
Yeah.
And it's because, again, you're
dependable.
putting out more horsepower than the factory 302 did.
Yep.
It bolts right in without any motor mount changes, because that was the motor sitting in that cradle when you took it out of the Crown Vic that you got out of. And, you can get the wiring harness, you can get you a computer to control it, and you've got a cheap, easy swap.
Here's the only downside, is because I'm extremely biased. But this is a biased take, so don't take this as fact. I think the 2-valve sounds horrible.
It does sound terrible.
I do not like, I'm just not a fan. Okay, I had a 2-valve, and the exhaust on it sounded pretty good. But that was also when I was, 17 years old that I thought it sounded good.
Yeah.
Now, 6 years later, I don't really think it sounds very good.
A 4-valve.
4-valve sounds way better. Coyote sounds better too. Yeah. I mean, I even think a 3-valve sounds better. I just don't think a 2-valve sounds very good.
Yeah.
I mean, they can, but I just, I'd much rather hear a nice chopping small block Ford than a modular 2-valve.
Oh, yeah. I agree. And so let's not spend no more time on those.
Well, we can talk all day about Fords.
Yeah, we can. So Hemi or a Magnum small block Chrysler,
whatever you
MoParty, whatever you call them. So we don't know a lot about them. No. All I know is when I was 17 years old, there's these twin girls that worked where I worked, and they were a little older, and one of them had a Dodge Dakota, and it was the new style that looked like the Ram. The
real, I think it's the second gen Ram. Yeah,
and it had a 318 in it.
Yeah.
And that truck...
Those are nice trucks.
...was, their mid-sized truck, but they were still pretty lightweight. This was a regular cab, short bed, with a 318 in it, and I think that motor probably only had 230 horsepower or something, but it would smoke the tires. It was a quick little truck, and I thought it was cool. I liked it.
Well, and you could get those trucks in 5 speeds, too. I don't know with the 318. I know with the 4.7... You could get them with a 5-speed in it, and
I'm sure you could with the 318.
That'd lay a pretty nasty burnout. I've seen it. They lay pretty good burnouts.
So when I think about, I don't know. I guess for some reason I never have noticed people build like a 318 or a 360 much. You
can find guys on YouTube, but it's not very. I don't know. I don't see it very often, but there are people on YouTube like. Gen 2 Garage, which if you know street racing channel, you probably know who Gen 2 Garage is. But I know they mess with Mopars a lot, and I know that they've done, if I'm not mistaken, I think they did a 360 or something. I could be wrong, but I think they've had a 360 build in one of their cars.
There's a local cruise in that we would hit up a lot until they stopped having it recently. But there was a guy there that had a regular cab long bed, first gen Ram, and it was a clean truck, and he had it lowered a little bit. Well, he had a built. I'm not sure if it was a 360 or 318, but it was built. I mean, It had a nice chop to it. Sounded good.
I'll tell you what, they can sound really, really nasty.
But it was just a cruiser. He wasn't building that truck to race it. He wanted it to sound good and look good. And the motor looked great.
I know you can build them to race because like I said, you see guys on YouTube every so often. But when it comes to like swaps, I don't know a ton about the swapping a Hemi into an older vehicle, but I do know that the engines are cheaper than a Coyote.
Yeah. So what we found is a Hemi, what was around on eBay for like $1,500.
Yeah.
And you can't even get close to touching a Coyote for that.
No.
Now, that's almost double what an LS is.
Well, I will say I found a locked up Coyote for $1,500.
Yeah. Okay, but that's beneficial.
Yeah, I know. Well, the Hemi, it's aluminum, and also you have the awesome hemispherical heads. I mean, that's what all the rave is about a Hemi, and something that I don't know if you really know, but I've done a lot of research into like race cars and stuff. But a lot of your pro mods are Hemis. They're a billet motor, but it's a Hemi. It has the hemispherical heads because apparently they get really, really good airflow.
And they all run the same motors, right?
Essentially, I mean, you don't have to have a Hemi in your pro mod, but that's just what a lot of guys do. Just because, I mean, they're considered Hemis because they have the hemispherical heads.
Yeah, okay.
Now, obviously, it's like a custom motor. Like it's not really anything, but it's got Hemi heads on it. So it's got billet Hemi heads, just because the hemispherical head it flows so much better.
Yeah.
So I mean, I personally think it'd be pretty cool to build a Hemi one day.
No, Hemis. I think
it'd be really nice.
The new Hemis sound mean.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, they sound good.
Well, I mean, I've even thought about like, man, what year did they bring the Challenger back out?
I guess it was like.
Was it like 05 or 06 or was it later?
No, it was later. Charger, I believe, came out in 04.
So what about the Challenger?
So the Challenger, I think, was closer to like maybe 9 or 10.
Well,
it was several years after.
I've got this desire for some reaon to build one of those old Challengers with like the 5.7 Hemi in it. I guess is what came in it.
5.7 in it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's different. Not many people build those. I mean, you see people building like the Hellcat motors and stuff. But anyway, that's kind of off topic a little bit. I don't know, but obviously, once again, just with everything else we've talked about, it is so much cheaper to just leave a 318 or a 360 in your truck. Or if you have an old truck or an old car that already has, or that doesn't have it but has the 6-cylinder in it, it's easier to swap that over than a Hemi, because when it comes to all these new motors, you got to look at all the computers that go with it.
And
that's the biggest thing. And if you're not someone who's fond of wiring or decent at wiring, I mean, you're going to be
over your head. Yeah. And a lot of you guys are probably sitting here saying you guys don't know what you're talking about because you can do them for about the same price. I disagree with that, because I don't think that you can. I think when you get down to it and you add up every bit,
you factor in all your extras
that you have to do, all your extras to do that swap, you're way higher than you would be.
Just like we were saying with the LS,
to keep the old motors.
Yeah, just like we were saying with the LS swap. Yeah, you could probably take stuff off of other vehicles and make it work on what you have.
Yeah.
Still, it's a lot of extra money that if you have a vehicle that has a V6 in it and you just want to swap the whatever V8 came out in that year, it's going to be so much cheaper on you just to do that, because it's literally motor mounts. That's
because if you're like me, guys, and you're like Zach, your time is money.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're sitting around and you just got plenty of time, we got a whole lot of work that needs to get done.
Yeah.
But your time is money. So if you can buy things and it's within your budget to buy the parts to do the swap quicker, like your wiring, because you can sit there and go through the wiring.
Yeah.
And you can figure out what goes to what and make it work. Okay?
Yeah.
But you can also go buy a wiring harness.
Depends on what kind of budget you're on.
It's all plug and play.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of budget you're on.
And that's what I'm saying about these swaps. You can do it on the cheap, and probably for just as cheap as you can the old small blocks. But if you want to do it and you're thinking about your time and what your time costs you, and how important your time is to you, and you're thinking about being able to make it easy to swap in and out also.
Yeah.
Plug and play type deal.
Especially if you're building a race.
You're going to spend the money.
If you're building a race car, you want it to be where you can just pull the motor out if you have to.
You don't want to have to be cutting a whole bunch of wires and moving a bunch of stuff around to make it work. Because that's another thing you got to think about. Like with a Coyote especially, you're putting a Coyote in a Fox body, you're putting a Coyote in an F100, steering components, headers,
that's
they
something,
don't fit.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about my cousin, and I know he's listening to this, but I helped him put a LS in a Blazer, S10 Blazer, and something that, I realized by helping him is how much extra went into doing that.
Yeah.
So a 350 swap would have been probably a little bit cheaper, but I mean,
a 350 would have sat right down in it.
Yeah. Well, we had to beat the firewall in, to get it to fit. I know we put a different steering column or steering shaft in it. I know he had headers. I think he had to buy certain headers.
Yep.
We had an issue with the oil pan, if I'm not mistaken. I think we needed like a F-body Camaro oil pan or something.
Yep.
So it fit over so I can't remember.
Center cradle.
Yeah, it was just, there was so many like random extras that went into it, and
you don't realize when you get started.
Yeah, and I think he quickly realized too that it was like, this isn't as cheap as a lot of people make it out to be.
Yes, exactly.
And it's easy to do. It's easy to think it's that cheap because you'll talk to people and they'll be like, oh yeah, I got this LS from my buddy for $300. And I threw a cam in it and put heads on it. I've only got $1,500 into this whole motor, and that's all it was. But how much was your swap?
How much time did you spend fixing and to make it work?
Yeah,
Yeah, and because to me, time is money.
Yeah, and it really, it all depends on what your budget is.
It is. It really does.
It's all dependent on your budget and your time, because for me, I don't really have a ton of time. Don't really have a big budget either, but there are certain things that I'm just going to have to suck it up and spend the extra money on because I don't have the time to leave it in the garage or fabricate it or things like that. Now with my current car, I had the time to fabricate a little bit. I mean, I don't have a lot of time, but I didn't need the car.
And we like to fabricate stuff, even though we're not real good at it.
Yeah.
But we like doing it, but it is time. A lot of times I look at him and I'm like,
maybe we should just buy this.
Maybe we should just buy this.
Well, I mean, there was like I was talking about just fabricating, because I need my brake dust shields on my car were completely rusted out. So I talked to him about just me fabricating my own, and he's like, "Why don't you just buy them?
You're gonna spend hours making this
when I can buy them for $60.
This round plate,
Well, I can make it for $60.
Yes, it would be cool to make them, but
yeah, it's just you save some time there.
Yeah.
And it's like we said earlier, it's all dependent on your budget. It's all dependent on your application.
Yeah.
Because if you want if you want a cruiser, I say just leave or just put your old school small block in it.
And that's where I'm at. I think that if, in my opinion, and I'm old head, I get that all the time. I'm not that old. If you're building a cruiser, in my opinion, you want something to ride around and go out on the weekends in, have a little fun, lay an nasty burnout. Keep it old school.
Yeah.
Go with a small block Ford, small block Chevy, and your old 318, your old 360. Keep it simple.
Yep.
You don't want to have something that you got to tune and figure out, okay?
I will say, though, once those new ones are tuned, they're pretty much...
They are.
They're good,
But
there's nothing else to mess with.
If you're wanting to build something to where, I want to start out small, but I want my ceiling to be up
unlimited.
Here, then go with a swap.
Yeah.
You need to do some kind of swap because you're going to want more.
You will regret it if you don't.
Yeah, and you're going to want more. You're going to want more power. You're not going to be happy with 450 horsepower.
Yeah.
You're going to want 600.
Well, unless you just want to be different, me personally, like I said, I'm very biased with small block Fords. I will most likely build a high horsepower small block Ford for mine rather than going Coyote swap. And if you want to be different and you want to spend the extra money to do that, go right ahead. Because, you can realistically make the same horsepower out of pretty much any of these with aftermarket parts. Yeah. But it's going to take you a lot longer to get there because you're starting at a lower horsepower rating than you would if you were to buy. And it's going to cost
you a lot of money.
Yes, to get there, it will. Because whereas, I can buy a supercharger for my Coyote, I will have to buy heads, cam, forced induction of some sort, built bottom end.
Have a machine to board out.
Tons and aftermarket block, all that stuff. And in the long run, you'll probably spend more money on a old school small block. But, I feel like up front you're going to spend more on a Coyote. But in the long run, it's gonna bite you in the butt with an old school small block for high horsepower applications.
My opinion don't matter to any of you guys, I know. But my opinion is if you've got a nice old small block and you don't plan to race this vehicle, keep that small block in there.
Yeah.
Or buy a crate engine and put it in there.
Yeah.
And because it's getting far and few between that you see the old school small block with a carb or an EFI. I mean, if you want something dependable and you want to just get in and hit the key, go get you a Phi-Tech, go get you a Holley, go get you an Ace. I've heard that the Aces are coming along and they're a pretty good product. So go get you a fuel injection. My truck's got an EFI on it. I've had my issues with that EFI, but when you're running that truck and it's tuned and running right, you can't beat that fuel injection in that thing. But
and I'll tell you what too.
I like carbs though too, because carbs are just a screwdriver and you can make it run. It's that easy.
I kind of want more of the old school stuff too. Personally, once again, like he said, my opinion doesn't matter either. But I just like seeing the old school stuff because I'm gonna tell you right now, there is nothing cooler than walking up to a old school 67 fastback. Maybe it's ratted out a little bit, and you see it's got a 429 in it with a Hurst shifter. There's nothing cooler than that. And maybe it's built out.
And there's nothing that sounds better.
Yeah,
either.
Maybe it's built out to 400 horsepower. Well, I know a guy I follow on Instagram. Follow a lot of people on Instagram, and I've said that a bunch this episode, but whatever. Follow a guy on Instagram that's got I think it's like a 300 or 400 horsepower, 289 in his 67 fastback.
Yeah.
And got a Hurst shifter in it. I mean, he just bangs gears in that thing, and it sounds so good because I think he revs it out to close to 6,500, 7,000 RPM. But still, it just sounds insane. It's different. It's a little ratty. It looks like an old school 70s hot rod, and I just don't think you can beat that.
And you can't beat a big block 454 in a Chevelle either.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's and the thing, they're so few and far between these days, like you said, that
sorry, my foot just slipped.
you can't beat a old school, build, and like you said, they're so few and far between that it's just cool to see it because you just don't see it much anymore. I mean, too often we go to these shows and all LS's, all. A lot Coyotes,
of engine swaps.
Yeah, and, but, engine swaps are great, and honestly, I can't condemn an engine swap because, why would I tell you to not do something that is essentially better in the long run? But I like seeing. For me, it's the cool factor.
It is cool.
In my opinion, this day and age, I think the cool factor is almost reverting to the old school.
Yeah, and I've heard other people say that
because you just don't see it
now. A lot of you guys you might be saying, well, I hardly ever see a Coyote swap or an LS swap. In your local cruise-ins, your local shows, a lot of times you don't. Because those guys,
media, though,
a lot of us guys that go to our local cruise-in, we're on more of a budget.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see as much as that. But if you're going to the big shows.
Or you're on social media.
That's all that's out there.
It's getting highlighted all the time by these big brands, too. If you just look at Holley, they're highlighting Godzilla swaps and Coyote
of course,
swaps.
LS swaps is huge,
obviously.
But, there's so much out there though now to be able to do these swaps, and it's getting easier all the time, and prices will come down. Prices will come down a lot as the technology improves.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not going to say that I won't do a Coyote swap one day.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say that I won't do a modular engine swap
or an LS swap.
We've
talked about doing a Regal with an LS in it.
Yes. So I'm not saying I won't ever do any of that, but I like the old school builds.
Yeah.
And right now, when I look at a budget and I look at how easy it is to get parts and stuff for these old school builds, I'm right into doing that. Keep on doing it.
So if you have an unlimited budget, I really think that, obviously a swap is the best way to go. And I just don't feel like there's a better option unless you're just really biased to the old school engines like I am with a small block Ford.
Yeah.
But, all in all, our opinions don't matter. So don't take this as fact. We're just two guys talking. We don't know what we're talking about. No. We're just kind of saying stuff. We've done research, obviously, but, maybe.
And we've talked to a lot of people.
Yeah. But maybe you're seeing this and you're like, well, that's completely wrong. All their facts are wrong. Listen, we just know what we've heard. We know what we've seen on forums. That's literally it. Yeah. So that's where all our knowledge comes from. We're not professionally trained mechanics. So
wish we were.
That would be cool. Yeah. But, that's kind of where we're at with all this.
Yeah.
So.
So we were talking about time a while ago, and how much your time means to you. And I know for me, I work a full-time job.
Yep.
We do this podcast. We are involved in our church.
Hot rodding.
We do our hot rodding stuff, and we've always got a project in the garage.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, always. So, and then of course you have your daily responsibilities. You know, you got family to take care of.
Keep up the house.
You got to keep the house up. You got to keep your grass cut.
Yep.
You know, you've got all your daily stuff. So when you think about time, I think about how much time I invest in my hot rodding. And
it's almost unhealthy at some points.
It is. When you get deep into a project and you don't want to quit,
mm-hmm.
It is sometimes unhealthy. And we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
But when I think about that time, and I think about, you think about priorities. I think about priorities as a man and what you got to take care of. Sometimes, we put our hot rodding, we probably put too much time into it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. That's what we love. That's what we enjoy doing. That's what we enjoy talking about.
Yeah.
It's your hobby. But what I am saying is, what if we put, half as much, but really, what if we put just as much time into a local ministry?
Really, all it takes is
a
couple hours. Take it just a couple hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to put half the time you put, into your hot rods into the church. Really, just a couple hours does a huge deal of difference.
Yeah, because I know that when I look at our church, for instance, okay, so our church to me is a big church. I grew up in a very small church.
Well, we grew up with maybe a big Sunday was 100 people.
Oh, that was a huge Sunday.
That was huge.
I mean,
that was
we
revival
typically
going
ran.
on.
Yeah, we typically ran like 60 to 70 people on a Sunday. Now we go to a church that is 300 plus in one service.
And it's growing. And we have 3 services.
Mind you, they have 3 services, yeah.
And it's growing every week.
Yes. So to us, that's a really big church.
Yep.
Now to some of y'all might go to bigger churches than that.
Yep.
But when I think about our days at the small church, growing up in the small church, serving in the small church, and I think about how you had older people who had kind of done their time, and some of them still served in, different capacities, but smaller capacities than they would have when they were 35, 40 years old. And then I think about the younger people who didn't serve. And I think about how there was a select few of us that kind of did a lot, did the majority of everything to keep that church going. And I always took it as, hey, we're a small church. And, everybody's trying to help out when they can and as much as they can. But we never had enough people to do everything.
It was just because there wasn't enough people.
Yeah. But now we're at a big church. And I look at this big church, and my first thought when I went into the church was, they don't need my help.
Yeah.
There are all these people here.
Well, yeah.
Now, it wasn't quite... We've been there for over a year. It wasn't
Yeah.
quite as big when we first started as has gotten now. In a year's time, the church has grown a lot.
But when you look at it from the outside and you don't know the logistics of it, it really looks like, why would
they got everything
help?
covered.
They've got everything's fine.
Yeah. But then I started noticing...
When you also start meeting people and talking
Started
to
meeting people, and I started noticing you got a lot of the same people doing a lot of different jobs. And then I started serving, okay, because I felt led, hey, I need to do something in this church. If I'm going to come to this church, I need to work in this church.
You receive a lot from the church, and you should give back.
Give back, yeah. So I started looking at that, and when I started serving, I started realizing even more how many people do multiple jobs in the church.
Yeah, and how little people actually serve.
Yes. And so I got to attending some of these, in our church, we call people who serve champions.
Yep.
Okay, that's just...
Because it's a little goofy thing we
It
do.
is.
Instead of volunteering, you champion the
champion.
local church.
I started going to some of these meetings here and there, and I started realizing how few people serve in the church.
Oh, yeah.
When you get to that meeting and you see how many people are at that meeting, even though I know everybody doesn't show up, everybody couldn't quite make it. But if everybody did show up, you see how few people served in that church. I mean, I'm talking like maybe 10%.
Yeah, I would say something like that.
So on a given Sunday, 10%. And that's really, man, guys. So
something that bothers me a lot is, and sorry if I hurt your feelings, but this is just how I feel, and this is something that I feel like is, well, we're about to read. This is backed by Scripture as well. So the way I see it is we have a lot of men in our church, men specifically. Now, women, there are plenty of women that don't serve as well, but I specifically see it as men. There are a lot of men that don't serve.
Yeah.
And it bothers me a lot because we've got, like he said, some men doing multiple jobs.
Yeah.
And they'll be there. A lot of women doing they will be there from 7:30 in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Working the whole
all
Sunday.
All 3 services.
And they got to go to work the next day just like everybody else does.
And they want to go to dinner with their family.
Yeah.
Lunch after church.
So,
everybody does that.
And I see so many men that don't do anything. So I have a job, a full job that I do about twice a month because we have enough people that we only have to do it twice a month. But then I'm also kind of a floater for like the usher team. So I kind of get thrown in if anybody needs any help. So we are severely lacking in the security team, which the other team I'm part of. So we're severely lacking in all 3 services. There are so many men in this church that receive every Sunday the word. Every Sunday they receive the word, a good service every Sunday, and they do not put that time back into their church. They receive, but they don't give. And our pastor preaches on that all the time, which is so crazy because, not to hurt any feelings or anything, but you get all kinds of amens throughout the church.
Oh, yeah.
When he said you need to give and, you need to give to receive. You need to have that open hand so that you can receive.
Yeah.
But
which you've talked about before.
Yes, because I love that. I love it so much. Because, we, obviously we're not perfect people. I could serve so much more in my church. I know I could. But I'm giving by serving, and I'm receiving the Word of God every Sunday that I go.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of men, and women too, are receiving and then keeping that hand closed and going home.
Not giving anything back.
And we have so many jobs that are unfilled. Well, not unfilled, but you've got people that work every Sunday. And realistically, if we had every person in the church do one job for one service, everyone would only have to do it probably less than once a month.
Oh, yeah.
It would be awesome. All you have to do is one job.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of people have stuff that they do. I realize if you got young kids, it's kind of hard to do this thing.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that I know don't have anything going on.
That could help.
I know some personally, that don't have anything going on that could help out. And we could really use the help.
Why don't you read our scripture to us?
So we're in 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 10 and 11, which says, "As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks as one who speaks, oracles of God. Whoever serves as one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen."
So we've all got some kind of talent. Even if your talent is, picking your nose.
I mean,
you can still go and serve on a security team, or you can serve as an usher. Yeah. It doesn't take a lot of talent to do some of these things. I'm not downgrading any of those jobs at all, okay?
No.
But typically men, and this is who I'm talking to, guys, men, we will serve as an usher. We will serve as a security guy. We'll serve as a parking lot guy, or we may serve on the team of guys that does the maintenance on the building, that kind of thing. But, if you serve on the team that does maintenance on the building, you could probably be serving in some other capacity too, because you're not doing maintenance on the building on Sunday mornings,
Yeah. But it's there is a lot. I just lost my train of thought.
What I was going to say about this scripture is telling us to use our talents, but it's also telling us that we're doing this to glorify God.
Yeah.
We're doing this for the pleasure of God, okay? So when you serve in your church, you're not serving the people. You're not serving the pastor. You're not serving the associate pastor. You're serving God. Your work in the church is worship. Yep. It's a form of worship. That church is growing, and that church is thriving because of people like you who are willing to serve and give their time back to God.
We're not saying any of this to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is just the harsh reality of it, to be honest. And,
it is.
Sometimes...
We're all men.
Yeah, I mean. So, sometimes, the message is just a little harsher than other times, but in reality, I mean, it's not only our church, it's all churches, and this is across the board. Churches. Everywhere you go is across the board. They need people to help. And if you don't think they do, they do. They just really get a hide in it.
Yeah, and men, we're calling on you.
Yes.
And we're calling on you.
As a man, you're supposed to step up as a leader.
That's right.
And you're supposed to lead within your church, within your home. You're supposed to lead in all, situations of life. You're supposed to try to be the leader in that situation. And, you can take an hour out of your Sunday to serve in your church. I serve 1 hour every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then if I'm needed as an usher, I hop in as an usher. Out. That's all it takes. And doing that is a tremendous help, because if I was not there, we would have one person working 4 weeks.
Yep.
And guys, it's hard on someone, especially because that one person I know has a small child, and it's very hard for them to do that.
And if you are in a smaller church than ours is, then, or if you're in a big church, let's just say this first off. If you're in a big church, don't think they don't need you.
Oh yeah, they can use you anywhere.
Because somebody is just covered up. Mm-hmm. Somebody is doing way more than they really should have to if a few good men would step up. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a small church, I encourage you really need to step up.
Yep.
Because as leaders of our homes, men, as leaders of our church, we need to step up and show good leadership. How are our sons, how are our daughters going to learn how to serve if we're not doing it in front of them? And this is a passion for me, because like I said at the beginning, I felt like they didn't need me. And the more I started looking around, I figured out, oh yes, they need me. But guess what? They don't need me because I need to be working for them. They need me to work for the Lord, and then that will help build the ministry.
And I think the Bible has a very, very clear, it gives a very, very clear definition, throughout the entire Bible of what a real man should be. And I think that is a big, big point of what a real man should be. Someone who serves.
Yeah,
someone
exactly.
who, puts in time. Because here's something else to think about. When you help somebody, you're not helping because you want to do it. It's like, it's not like you are, biting at the bit to try to go help somebody. You're helping someone because they need you, and they know, and that you can do what they're asking you to do, and you're going out of your way to do it. And that's what you need to do, because you are receiving something from the church. You need to go out of your way to help the church, whether it's an hour, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes, just to make sure everybody's okay and make sure everybody's got what they need. It's like you need to, as a man, as a real man, you need to put in time at your church.
And one of the number one things that attracted me to the church we're in is there was a lot of men. And not only just men, but manly men.
Yes, real men.
These were men that were serving. But I also look around, I see a lot of men that aren't serving. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, guys, man, we just need to step up.
Yep.
We got to step up. Look at where our country is right now. Look at where we're at, guys. As men, we got to step up and be men. We have got to be leaders. And what a great place to start than in your church. Mm-hmm. Leading in your church and leading in your home.
Well, you got to think too. Maybe you think, they don't need my help, but I mean, they need help keeping things going. I mean,
there's something you can do.
Keep the lights on.
Yeah.
They need people to, especially at our church, organize the parking lot. It would be ridiculous if there was not some people trying to help park.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many people that show up. I mean, especially on big Sundays like Easter Sunday. I mean, the parking lot was packed, and if those guys weren't there to find those little spots. It's something as simple as the parking lot team. You know what I'm saying?
They have a great job that they do. Yeah. And you know what?
And the church needs it. And
when you pull in, they got a big smile on their face.
Yes, exactly. They greet you. And I mean, the church needs our kids' ministry. Yep. I mean, they need people all the time. And
they need men involved in that, guys.
Yes.
I know you don't want to be babysitters, but don't look at it like that.
The head of the children's ministry is a husband and a wife.
Yeah.
And then right underneath them is another husband and a wife.
And that's at a lot of churches, guys.
Yeah.
A husband and wife lead it, and they need men to step in and help.
Yeah. It's just, like I said, not to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is the harsh reality of it. There's too many men and women, too, that, just think maybe the church doesn't need me to serve and I can just go. But you are needed. You are needed very, very much. And God, and Peter talks about in 1 Peter, how you need to serve in your church, because that church has to run somehow.
Yeah.
And if you're not serving, then how's it going to run?
And a lot of times guys will say, I give my dollars. Okay, well, guess what? Your dollars are great, but what the church needs is they need you.
Yes.
Okay, they need you. And
the dollars pay for the bills, but what's going to happen?
They need the dollars too, but they need you.
Yeah. I mean, dollars pay for the bills, but what about when something breaks?
Yeah.
Are we going to have to raise even more money than what we do just to keep the lights on? Because I know some churches are...
Or do we got a few good men that could step up and fix it?
Exactly. I know some churches barely can afford to keep their lights on. And what are they going to do when they have, some catastrophic failure, and they don't have men in their church that can step up and help?
You guys, if you're paying attention to this, a lot of you guys have some mechanical ability. Yeah. You can help in a lot of different ways.
Majority of people that listen to this, work on some sort of hands-on.
Yeah, and that's where I was getting at. We spend so much time on our hot rods. Mm-hmm. What if we give 2 hours a week?
What if we take our mechanical capabilities and maybe put them into a maintenance team for the church?
Yeah, exactly.
Or
at a local ministry. I mean, there's so many local ministries for homeless shelters, and
it doesn't even have to be
ministry.
The church. Just putting into something that serves the Lord.
Give back to God.
Yes. Giving back to your community in a way that it can serve the Lord is...
And our salvation is not based on works.
No,
by no means. It's not. It's based on our faith in Jesus Christ. But God wants us to give. And Jesus came to the earth and he gave. Yep. He was a servant. He washed his disciples' feet, for goodness sake.
He was a servant the whole time.
Yes.
I mean, he didn't do anything but serve. When he died on the cross for our sins, he was serving.
Exactly. So what are we to do? Can we not serve a little?
If we're supposed to live in the footsteps of Jesus, we have to serve.
Exactly.
It is required, because that's exactly what Jesus did his entire time on earth. I mean, from preaching in the temple at 12 years old, he was in temples learning and teaching and things like that. Right. And he was serving from the time of being a child until he died at 33 years old.
He served us, and that's why we're sitting here.
Yes, and we need to, in return, serve him. We receive a good message every Sunday, so turn around and put it back in the church.
That's right. So we're going to leave it at that, guys. We know that was a little harsh, but...
That's just the harsh reality of it,
That's what's on my heart, and I think it's been on Zach's heart, too.
It is. It's something I'm very passionate about, because I see a lot of it in our church that I think needs to change.
And we know it's got to be going on in your guys' church, too. Churches need you, man. Mm-hmm. Step up.
And women, but especially men.
Men step up and lead. So if you like the content you got today from us, go like, share, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube. We want your comments. We want your feedback, so we know how we can improve this thing. Go follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Faith Family Cars Podcast. And then you can also find our podcast on Spotify, iTunes podcast, iHeartRadio, and also Amazon Music. Go check us out and give us a follow. Subscribe to our socials, guys. You'll see things throughout the week going on. You'll see things that we have coming up. Constantly posting stuff. We love you. We appreciate you guys following us and listening. We'll see you next time.